If you were a juror and had to decide right now, how would you go, guilty or not guilty, Terry Austin? You were in the courtroom all week.
Well, if I had to decide today, and I'm sitting on that jury, and I've heard the evidence thus far that the prosecution has put forth, I would say not guilty. And I certainly think that's where the jury is right now. They have to prove that case beyond a reasonable doubt, and there are multiple doubts in this case so far. Nothing I've seen, not the DNA so far, not the ballistics information, nothing I've seen so far has put Melly in that car with the and has him as the
YNW Melly trial is practically done at this point. Unless the prosecution are holding onto the world's greatest evidence, lawyers are already stating Melly has complete control. Here's what you need to know. At the start of trial today, we saw a report of judge in the YNW Melly trial ruled that the undercover detective Danny Polo had to remove his mask for the remainder of his testimony, as this is the same Danny Polo who stated this about YNW Melly just a day prior.
And they would quickly get checked. That happened to those two kids. I don't know how old they are. Those two guys that were claiming money, the Island Boys, with the fun haircut. Okay. Yeah, they were claiming to be members of, which is a set of, and they quickly got checked by almost every that could find them on social media. They got and they then had to recant and apologize.
Did you find any evidence whatsoever of any recanting or apologizing by Mr. Demmons in the records that you reviewed?
There's no recanting, there's no apologizing, there's no one calling out Mr. Demmons for being a fake.
That same man had to now remove his mask in the courtroom, as while he was doing it, YNW Melly's reaction to it seemed a little odd. It almost seemed as if YNW Melly knows exactly who this man is in the streets.
Yes, sir. You can take off your mask.
Yes, sir.
Over. State's objection, Your Honor, based on the previous issues.
Jury entering.
While he was doing his testimony, without even realizing, this man Danny Polo just made YNW Melly look very innocent, even though he is a prosecution witness. This means he is supposed to make YNW Melly look guilty, however, he did the total opposite today.
Now Melly's defense is now entering into cross-examination of Danny Polo. And what Danny is admitting on the stand, now Danny Polo had admitted that YNW Melly was actually being recruited by two different sets. And based off of the text message thread between the different individuals trying to recruit Melly, Melly was not replying. Melly stated weeks later that he was so busy doing radio interviews and shows that he just didn't have time to reply. And if you go back and read the text messages, those recruiters were basically begging Melly to reply back. And he didn't. Because Melly was an up-and-coming rapper who had a ton of money and ambition, and any of these different groups would love to have him under their roster. Because Melly wasn't interested in being a he was being labeled as somebody who was false flagging. It's possible that it was Shine that did the drive, all because Melly didn't want to be a part of their group.
We now have evidence breaking down the quote-unquote drive-by theory, and it is now definitely back into play, as it is starting to seem YNW Melly was telling the truth the entire time about the drive-by. As a viral report would go on to state, the prosecutor is increasingly showing that this case really depends on little evidence. All of the messages are irrelevant. It shows nothing at all. No motive, no mention of the crime. It is really just pure nonsense. However, things would just continue to get more interesting during the trial, as the same online lawyers mentioned to watch out for one specific thing. Now, this is the transitioning of making it seem like YNW Bortland is the guilty one. However, Danny Polo today practically did this for us. Now, let me explain. Within 30 minutes of day one in the trial, it was reported YNW Bortland had powder residue on his hands and a change of clothing for when he dropped off Sack sack chaser and juvie to the hospital. YNW Bortland and YNW Melly were the only two men in the vehicle with them, including this video of YNW Melly's lawyer breaking it down.
Evan's lies, those were his lies. Cortland Henry shows up at Memorial Hospital, Miramar. You don't see him sitting there, but where you will see him sitting is in the driver's seat of a car with two bodies, car riddled with bullets. And when he shows up with a change of clothing, change of shirt, powder residue on his hands, evidencing that he had discharged a firearm. And he lies. He lies about where the incident occurred. He lies about how it occurred. And he lies about not having a phone. I think it was Miss Bradley herself who said, everybody has a phone in his pocket. Not Cortland Henry. There were 3 phones.
YNW Melly's own lawyer just revealed YNW Bortland was lying to the feds when he brought sack chaser and juvie to the local hospital, as that interview of Bortland lying was also shared to the jury, making it not really look good for YNW Bortland.
And I'm driving, ducking for my life, trying to make sure I don't get hit. And you telling me, you telling me about some shit. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to make sure I don't get hit. I'm driving. I'm trying to make sure I don't get hit. You know what I'm saying? What I'm gonna be worried about? You know what I'm saying?
I know it's not for you to worry about.
Shit crazy, bro.
But if you tell me it happened there's got to be some evidence there. There's going to be broken glass, just like there's broken glass over here when you guys open the doors and stuff like that. Okay, there's going to be broken glass over there when the windows got out. There's going to be casings from the people at your car. Okay, there's going to be evidence over there. Okay, right now there's nothing. I kind of think I know what happened because I got information.
The famous rap lawyer would go on to confirm this was YNW Melly's lawyer, practically sounding like he is snitching on YNW Bortland.
And we have an absolute shell being dropped by the defense, a mic drop moment. The lead attorney on Melly's defense team telling the jury that Cortland Henry lied to police when he showed up at Memorial Hospital that morning. He lied about what happened. He lied about not having a phone on him. That Cortland Henry, this is according to Melly's attorney, that Cortland Henry showed up at that hospital with a change of clothes on, and that Cortland Henry showed up at that hospital with powder residue on his hands.
As when the trial would resume after its recess, we would then see a report of forensic scientists that covered the passings in the YNW Melly trial says co-defendant YNW Bortland tested positive for firearm residue.
So the right hand of Cortland Henry contained 0 particles characteristic of shot residue and 2 component particles, and the left hand contained 1 particle characteristic of shot residue and 1 2-component particle.
Okay. And can you explain to us what that means?
Basically, overall, there was shot residue present on the hands.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, the trial is now starting to look as if it's transitioning into YNW Bortland being the guilty one. YNW Bortland will be having his own separate trial for this case within the next year or 2. And with all of this new information I just shared now out to the public, a new voting poll for YNW Melly being guilty or not would be released. With 70,000 voters, 19% voting guilty, 74% voting not guilty, and 6% on other. As all of the evidence the prosecution are using is practically not even usable against YNW Melly, or it seems as if it makes Bortland look like the guilty one, as the famous rap lawyer would then go on to share this.
Big drama at the YNW Melly trial today, and I told people this was going to happen. They didn't want to listen to me. The judge very upset that the courtroom camera and microphones are picking up whispers of the defendant's lawyers to each other, to the defendant. I also have raised issues. There's a photographer in there snapping away millions of photos of YNW Melly's face all day. There's a cameraman who zooms in on YNW Melly while he's having exchanges with his lawyers. Courtroom is a privilege. With our human eyes and our human ears, and our human time, we can see certain things. But when you record with high sensitivity mics and zoom and you focus in on the defense team, That's not a privilege that you have. I can bet the defense is going to use this to probably ask for another mistrial or add this to the long list of problems that they have with this trial and then ask for a mistrial.
With very little evidence in the courtroom, the mistrial talks are starting to rise again in Melly's trial. YNW Melly's lawyers are making amazing arguments, proving that Melly is looking very innocent, as the judge also announced he will now be excluding evidence due to the prosecution violating the discovery rules, as explained once again by the famous rap lawyer.
YNW Melly trial, more missteps from the prosecution. This time, the judge issuing a sanction. The sanction is the prosecution is not going to be allowed to use certain evidence. The reason? The prosecution failed to turn the evidence over in a timely manner. The defense had accused them of trying to plug up holes. You're going to see the footage from the judge where the judge says, look, this is not the right way to do it. Ultimately, I don't know if this is a huge part of their case, this evidence that's being excluded, but it speaks to the issue that the defense attorney was talking about, is this is a case. If you've got your evidence, go ahead and present it. The way the evidence is coming out, there's just too many missteps, too many technical mishaps.
This would go on to surprise the entire courtroom. The prosecution are running out of evidence to use. This is now going to make the trial last even longer than most expected, as jurors are now asking the judge, hey, how long is this going to take? As the average trial for a case like this only lasts 7 days. This was the response by the famous rap lawyer.
So the answer to this question is going to you, because initially I thought the answer to this question was trial will last maybe 2 to 3 weeks, so sometime at the end of next week it's over, we get a verdict next week or maybe the week after. In fact, the judge said in open court this morning, a juror had asked the judge, hey, how long is this trial going to take? Can you give us some forecast so we can plan? And the judge said this, spoke to lawyers on both sides. They expect trial will conclude at some point by the end of July, meaning trial is likely to last all of this month, June. They're going to take a day or two off for July 4th. Then trial is going to last through all of July. You're talking about multiple weeks, multiple months. It has to be said.
For YNW Melly's sake, it doesn't matter how long the trial lasts, because everything is looking very positive, as even when the FBI agent that specializes in cell phone data research came to the stand, it didn't really matter, as the report would go on to state YNW Melly's lawyers questions FBI agent that did an analysis on Melly's phone at the time of the crime.
Based on the information, you can't really tell the court precisely which locations these phones are following in, can you?
No, one of the limitations of cellular analysis is that you can only say a general area where the device would be at a given time.
All right. So even with the general analysis, all of the stuff that we've gone through for about 4 or 5 hours, at the end of the day, you can never give an exact location.
True.
And could you tell if somebody was walking around a car with the phone? Would you be able to tell that?
No.
So it'd be your testimony that this phone, 9807, could be from here to here, correct?
Yes.
And what was the distance?
The prosecution were hoping that this FBI agent would be a huge help. However, it wouldn't be until the next topic of conversation where things would get more interesting. A DNA specialist then took the stand. His job was to go over DNA research on items that were found at the crime scene, including items that were inside of the Jeep that the crime allegedly happened in. This may have been Melly's biggest win. The report goes on to state, DNA analyst confirms YNW Melly's DNA was not found on multiple items that were recovered at the crime scene.
So going to item number 22, the swab from the Gucci sandals. We're able to compare the profile from Mr. Demons as opposed to the profile developed from those sandals.
I did, and he was excluded.
The stain on the front of the t-shirt, item number 23. We're able to compare Mr. Demons' profile to that.
I did a comparison, and he was again excluded.
What about item number 24, the cutting of the stain of the rear of the t-shirt?
After comparisons were done, he was excluded.
Okay, then on item number 25, the swab of stain from the Air Jordans.
Again, an exclusion.
Going on to item number 26, the swab from the yellow jacket.
An exclusion as well.
And in terms of the item number 27 and 28, the swabs at the Gatorade bottles. What were the results on that?
Those were both exclusions.
YNW Melly's DNA not being found inside of the vehicle is a massive win. However, his DNA was found on the car door handle, which is obvious because we watched him get into the vehicle.
Excuse me, you're able to see? Yes, all right.
However, here is where the prosecution messed up in this case. On the first day of the YNW Melly trial, the prosecutors mentioned YNW Melly was picked up by Fredo Bang on the night it happened.
And Chris Thomas are. So what you're also going to find out is while Mr. Devins is out there on the side of the road, 4 in the morning, 4:42 specifically, he sends a drop pin, digital homing beacon, to his current location to one of his friends, Frederick Givens. Frederick Givens is also involved in the music industry, and he asked to be picked up. Frederick Givens then, about 11 minutes later, is sent another drop pin where Mr. Devins has moved a couple of meters. What you're going to find out as well, though, is these digital leashes, they have more than just phone calls.
With them now mentioning Fredo Bang picked up YNW Melly, it basically confirms YNW Melly did leave the Jeep at some time within that night. All YNW Melly's lawyers now need to do is just prove that YNW Melly was picked up by Fredo Bang before the crime happened. And it's going to be very easy to do so, as YNW Melly's DNA was not found inside of the vehicle. YNW Melly and his lawyers know this because this is how they reacted during the first recess after hearing that information.
Thank you. Let the record reflect the jury step down. Counsel remain. All with the defendant and witness. Yes, counsel, I'm sorry. I just figured it was easier if we just let the jury go.
Understood.
Makes sense. Your Honor, may we have this discussion just in case there needs to be some supplementation testimony outside the presence of the court?
Sure.
Seeing YNW Melly laughing and smiling during the trial is not sitting well with Sack Chaser and Juvie's family. This would make YNW Juvie's father speak up, as it's very obvious the prosecution are not doing a good job at all. So he decided to come in, react, and share his opinions on Melly, as they do not want the focus being taken off of him. We would see a report of the father of YNW Juvie explained why he believes YNW Melly is responsible for this crime.
From the day one, I believe that Melly was responsible for my son on October 26th when I first heard the story, because his explanation when I finally talked to him in Cortland on a FaceTime, their response and how they was reacting, they showed no remorse. They didn't act like they was grieving, like they lost a best friend or nothing. They was, in my opinion, they was in the best spirits. They wasn't reacting to, they act like they didn't have to take a loss at all. That's how I took it. And then when I was talking to them, I still had in the back of my mind that something's not right.
I could only imagine how annoying it could be sitting there in the courtroom for hours on end, watching the prosecution absolutely fumbling this court case. However, YNW Melly's music manager 100K Track mentioned for all of us to wait for this moment. As YNW Melly had these great defenses all along, we just didn't know it yet.
He built a real great solid team away from just being innocent, because he wouldn't do such a crime. He prepared himself and got a proper, defense. Their job is to handle themselves in trial, not on social media. You guys are taking it that way. If they say they got DNA in a car, I'm just gonna tell you, Melly DNA was found in the car. You're gonna think, yeah, his DNA was found in the car the day of the. Oh, he jumped in a car and his DNA was in the car. He did it, okay? But you're not gonna put the fact that this was his car for 6-7 months on those documents and dockets and just automatically be like, yo, he's fried. You don't even know what the defense is. You don't even know what the rebuttal is. You don't even know why that situation occurred. You hear ballistics flying. You don't know what the defense is. You hear this, you hear that. You get what I'm saying?
I'm gonna be honest.
As a perfect example being the firearm in question in this case. As in the report of YNW Melly's reaction when a firearm expert tells the judge he didn't bring the firearm because he has no idea which item was used for this crime. With YNW Melly's reaction to this great defense.
Why not?
So the first thing is I didn't have a firearm, so I can't know which firearm I'm going to use in order to replicate any of my tests. So I can't make tests for this determination because I don't know what firearm was used.
Okay. Do you have a